At a fancy charity gala, a woman walked up to me and smiled. "You look stunning," she said, admiring my dress. "Did he buy that for you too?" Confused, I asked what she meant. She pulled out a bracelet, one that matched mine exactly. "I thought I was the only one," she whispered. My blood ran cold as she showed me screenshots, lavish vacations, shopping sprees, expensive dinners. All paid for with our money. That night, I let him introduce us. When he saw us standing together, his face turned white. "Surprise," I said, clinking my glass against hers. At a fancy charity gala, a woman walked up to me and smiled. "You look stunning," she said, admiring my dress. Then her eyes landed on my wrist, and something changed in her expression. "Did he buy that for you too?" I frowned. "Excuse me?" She reached into her clutch and pulled out a bracelet, one that looked exactly like mine. My stomach dropped. "I thought I was the only one," she whispered. And just like that, my world started to crack. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just stared at the bracelet in her hand, then back at the one on my wrist. Identical. Gold chain, tiny diamonds, delicate but expensive. The kind of gift that made a woman feel special. A gift from my husband. The room around me faded into white noise. She wasn't done. She pulled out her phone, tapped the screen, and turned it toward me. Photos. Screenshots. Texts. There was Daniel, my husband, smiling at her on a yacht. Holding her hand at a candlelit restaurant. Kissing her forehead at an airport. Lavish vacations. Shopping sprees. Expensive dinners. All paid for with our money. I felt my pulse in my ears. I tried to swallow, but my throat was dry. I glanced up at her. Blonde, elegant, beautiful. The kind of woman that men noticed. The kind that my husband had definitely noticed. She was still looking at me. Hesitant. "How long?" I asked. She exhaled, like she'd been holding it in. 3 years. 3 years. 3 years of stolen moments. 3 years of lies. 3 years of my husband leading 2 lives while I went about my days, completely unaware. I should have felt angry. I should have started yelling, throwing things, doing something. Instead, I just stood there. Frozen. She was watching me carefully now, waiting to see how I'd react. I took a slow breath. "What's your name?" I asked. She hesitated. "Charlotte. Charlotte." I let the name settle. The woman my husband had been betraying me with. The other half of this nightmare. I looked back at the screenshots. There was one of them in Paris, standing in front of the Eiffel Tower. Another at a resort in the Maldives, drinks in hand, sun-kissed and happy. I did the math in my head. 3 years. That meant while I was home, waiting up for him during his business trips, he was here with her. When he had come home late, saying he was stuck in meetings, he was probably slipping out of a hotel room, kissing her goodbye. Every expensive gift he bought me, was he feeling guilty? Or just covering his tracks? My fingers curled around my champagne glass. I looked at Charlotte. "You didn't know about me?" She shook her head. "I knew of you. But I thought," she hesitated. "He told me you were separated. That you were only living together for the kids." "We don't have kids." I clenched my jaw, inhaled slowly through my nose. Charlotte's eyes flickered with something regret, maybe. But not guilt. She had been lied to too. I exhaled. "I think it's time we introduced ourselves properly." To him. Her lips parted slightly. Then, she nodded. Together, we turned toward the crowd. Daniel was standing near the bar laughing, a glass of whiskey in hand. He looked relaxed. Happy. Completely unaware that his double life was about to come crashing down. We walked toward him, side by side. Halfway there, he turned his head. His eyes found me first, and he smiled. Then he saw Charlotte. The smile vanished. His body stiffened. His eyes darted between us, then down at Charlotte's wrist, at the bracelet. Then mine. His face turned pale. I stopped in front of him, tilted my head slightly. Surprise. Charlotte lifted her drink. Clinked it against mine. Daniel opened his mouth, but no words came out. His throat bobbed. He looked around, like maybe this was some kind of prank, like there was some way out of this. There wasn't. For a moment, Daniel didn't move. His eyes flicked between me and Charlotte, the way a man looks when he realizes he just stepped into traffic and a bus is coming straight at him. I let the silence stretch, let him sit in the weight of it. Then, finally, he swallowed hard and spoke. "Rebecca." His voice was low, careful. "Let's talk somewhere private." I took a slow sip of my drink, then glanced at Charlotte. "What do you think, Charlotte? Should we step aside?" Her lips curled into a sharp smile. "Oh, I think I'd love to hear what he has to say." Daniel inhaled through his nose, his jaw tightening. His usual confidence, the easy charm he carried like a second skin, was cracking. "Not here," he said again, this time through clenched teeth. "Please." I set my glass down on the bar and folded my arms. "Then start talking." His eyes darted around. A few guests were watching now, just a few at first, but the tension in the air was magnetic. People could sense something was happening. A scandal unfolding in real time. Daniel licked his lips, lowered his voice. Rebecca, don't do this. Oh, I'm the problem now? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's rich, Daniel. I mean, really. You should be proud. 3 years. That's impressive. Charlotte crossed her arms. He told me you were separated. Living in the same house for the kids. Daniel shot her a sharp look. Charlotte, we don't have kids, Daniel. My voice was cold. His Adam's apple bobbed again. He had no escape. A waiter walked by, slowing slightly as he passed, his eyes flicking over us like he could feel the tension. Daniel exhaled sharply. Fine. Yes. I lied. But, Rebecca, he reached for my hand, but I stepped back. It's not what you think. I laughed again. Oh, really? Because what I think is that my husband has been taking his mistress on vacations, buying her jewelry, spending our money on her, while I sat at home like an idiot. Is that not what happened? Daniel's jaw tightened. Charlotte narrowed her eyes. Yeah, Daniel. I'd love to hear this explanation. You told me I was the only one. He turned to her, his voice dropping. Charlotte, let's talk about this somewhere else. But Charlotte was shaking her head. No, you don't get to control this anymore. Daniel's eyes flicked between us. He was scrambling. Then something changed in his expression, like he had just made a decision. He straightened, smoothed a hand over his tie. And when he spoke next, his voice had that familiar edge of arrogance. You want the truth? He looked straight at me. Fine. Here it is. The noise of the gala seemed to fade. I never wanted to marry you, he said. The words hit like a slap. Daniel exhaled, ran a hand through his hair. It was the right choice. You were the safe choice. The woman my parents wanted me to marry. The one who would keep my life stable. You and me, we're good on paper. We make sense. I felt my heart hammering, but I didn't speak. He turned to Charlotte. And you? You were fun. You were what I needed. Charlotte's mouth parted slightly, like she had been punched in the gut. I gritted my teeth, ignoring the burn in my chest. So let me get this straight. I was the obligation. And she was the thrill? Daniel looked at me, and I saw something flicker in his eyes. Maybe guilt. Maybe regret. Maybe just the realization that he had finally lost control of the situation. I never meant for it to get this far, he said quietly. I stared at him. The man I had spent 10 years of my life with. The man I had trusted. A sharp laugh bubbled out of Charlotte. Jesus Christ. You're actually the worst. Daniel's face twisted. You both were never supposed to find out. I clenched my jaw. And yet, here we are. The room around us had gone quieter now. People were definitely watching. Daniel must have noticed too, because he took a deep breath and lowered his voice. Rebecca, let's not make a scene. I tilted my head. Oh, now you care about appearances? Something flickered in his eyes, panic maybe. I leaned in slightly, keeping my voice low but firm. You spent our money on her, Daniel. I pointed at Charlotte, then at the bracelet still on my wrist. And you were careless enough to give us matching gifts. Daniel pressed his lips together, as if choosing his words carefully. I can fix this. Charlotte scoffed. Fix this? Daniel turned toward me. We can fix this. I stared at him. And then, before I could respond, Charlotte let out a sharp breath and muttered, oh, for fuck's sake. She reached into her clutch and pulled out her phone again. My eyes flicked to the screen, and this time, it wasn't just photos of them. It was a bank statement. Charlotte tapped a highlighted number. Recognize this transaction? She asked, her voice steady but cold. Daniel's eyes flickered. I looked down. The amount was insane. 6 figures. Withdrawn from our joint account. My breath caught. I looked up at Daniel, and for the first time that night, I saw it. Fear. Real fear. Something deeper was happening here. Something I hadn't realized yet. And I was about to find out exactly what it was. I stared at the bank statement on Charlotte's phone, my pulse hammering in my ears. The amount was staggering, 6 figures, gone from our joint account. Daniel's hand twitched at his side, and for the first time, real fear flickered across his face. I took a step closer, lowering my voice. What the hell is this? Daniel swallowed, his eyes darting between me and Charlotte. It's complicated. Charlotte let out a sharp laugh. Try me. Daniel exhaled, running a hand through his hair. His usual charm was completely gone now. He looked like a cornered animal. I turned back to Charlotte. How did you get this? She smirked. Daniel made the mistake of using my laptop to check his emails once. Logged into his bank account and forgot to log out. I wasn't looking for anything, but when I saw the numbers. She shook her head. Something felt off. So I took screenshots. Daniel's jaw clenched. You went through my finances? Charlotte shrugged. I guess now I know why you freaked out when you realized you left your email open. I looked at Daniel, my hands trembling. Where did this money go? Silence. Daniel, I snapped. Where is the money? He hesitated, then finally muttered, it's gone. Charlotte and I exchanged a glance. Gone where? She asked. Daniel exhaled, looking around the room like he was trying to find an escape. When he finally met my eyes again, something dark lingered in them. I suddenly knew, deep in my gut, that whatever he was about to say was going to be worse than I imagined. You remember when I told you I was investing in a new business venture? He asked carefully. A cold weight settled in my chest. Yes, I said slowly. Daniel looked at Charlotte. And remember when I told you that I had a huge deal coming through? That I'd finally be able to divorce Rebecca and start over with you. Charlotte's face twisted. Yeah, what about it? Daniel exhaled. It was a scam, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. A sharp silence stretched between us. Charlotte blinked. What? Daniel clenched his jaw. I lost everything. The investments. The money from our joint account. Even the money I borrowed. My blood turned to ice. Wait, borrowed? He rubbed his temples. Look, I thought it was legit. The guy was convincing. I wired the money and then he vanished. The account was wiped. Phone disconnected. It's gone. Charlotte shook her head, stunned. You told me you were making money, not losing it. Daniel let out a bitter laugh. Yeah, well, I was trying to buy time. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I thought finding out about the affair was the worst part of tonight. But this was something else entirely. Who did you borrow money from? I asked, my voice barely steady. Daniel didn't answer. Daniel, I pressed. Who? He shifted uncomfortably. I had to get creative. Charlotte's expression darkened. That's not an answer. I was already shaking my head. Tell me you didn't borrow from. I had no choice, he hissed. I thought I could flip the investment and pay it back before anyone noticed. I inhaled sharply. How much? Silence. How much? I demanded. Daniel's eyes flickered. Another 6 figures. Charlotte paled. Jesus Christ. I felt my stomach drop. Who did you borrow from, Daniel? Daniel hesitated. Then, in a barely audible voice, he muttered a name. And that's when the real terror set in. Because I knew that name. And I knew exactly the kind of people Daniel had just screwed over. Daniel had borrowed money from them. My blood turned to ice. I knew that name. It wasn't a bank. It wasn't some shady online lender. It was worse. It was the kind of people you don't owe money to. The kind who don't send friendly reminders or offer payment plans. Charlotte stared at him. Tell me you're joking. Daniel's face was pale. He wasn't joking. You absolute idiot, I hissed. My hands were shaking. You didn't just blow our money. You dragged us into something dangerous. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. I was desperate. You gambled with our lives, I snapped. Charlotte was shaking her head, stepping back slightly like she was realizing, maybe for the first time, just how deep this mess went. And that's when I noticed them. 2 men in suits, standing near the entrance. They weren't looking at the art, or sipping champagne, or chatting with donors. They were watching us. I took a slow breath. My voice dropped. Are they here for you? Daniel didn't turn around. He didn't need to. His silence was enough. Charlotte muttered something under her breath and grabbed her clutch. I'm out. Daniel's head snapped up. Charlotte, wait, she laughed bitterly. Wait? Are you insane? You're married. You're broke. You're in debt to criminals. And you're dumb enough to think I'd stay. Daniel reached for her wrist, but she yanked away like he was toxic. Enjoy your safe wife, Daniel, she spat. Maybe she can clean up your mess like she always does. Then she was gone. I exhaled sharply. You know what? I said, my voice eerily calm. She's right. You do expect me to clean up your mess. Daniel turned back to me. Rebecca, please. We can fix this. I felt something snap inside me. I laughed. We didn't do this. You did this. The men near the entrance started moving. I leaned in, my voice low. I'm done, Daniel. You're on your own. His face twisted. Don't say that. You already lost Charlotte, I said, stepping back. Now you're losing me. He shook his head, stepping forward. Rebecca, I turned, grabbed my purse and walked away. Daniel didn't follow. Maybe he couldn't. As I stepped outside into the crisp night air, I heard voices behind me. The deep, cold kind of voices that didn't ask twice. I didn't turn back. For 10 years, I had been the safe choice. The wife who kept things running. The woman who trusted too much. Not anymore. I kept walking. And for the first time in years, I felt free.